Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about going beyond the big five for gains, for size, for maximum jactitude. And you know, a lot of people are aware that I promote the big five, or what I call the big five, for general size and strength, because I don't really differentiate between those two things. And I know to a lot of people that's a controversial statement to make, but it really is based on reality. Size and strength are something like 90% overlapped when you look at the actual research on it. They really and truly are. Until drugs come into the mix. And I mean size and strength relative to your height, your arm and leg lengths, things like that. In other words, what you find is that when you take people who they have the same size arms and legs in terms of length, same length torso, same height, if you know how much muscle mass they have spread through their body and you go compare them to different people, they're going to scale on their big lifts pretty much based upon how much muscle they have in those regions, right? And researchers have known this for a long time. You're going to be able to get actually a guess within 10% sometimes. Like there's actual data on that where they got calculations and figured out based on a DEXA scan and plugging someone's height in, they could get within 10% guess of their max squat when they tested it. That's how close that stuff is. So you really can't differentiate between the two. That's why I tell people generally to get generally big, especially, you know, your first year, second year in, you really need to focus on these big five, that they're the most efficient movements for you to get there, right? And that's the squat, the deadlift, the bench press, the standing barbell press, and a weighted chin up or weighted pull up, all right? People say, oh no, where's rows and all that? Don't you program rows all the time? Yeah, I program rows for novices. But I also will have them go over to chins pretty quickly. Again, people in a lot of novice programs, I'll do that. But the point we get to is that, yeah, you will build your base off those lifts. But is that all you should be doing? No, of course not. Early on it is. Meaning a lot of times a lot of novices want to do a lot of other stuff. And my problem with it comes down to, do they actually benefit from it? Or is it actually going to interfere with their results? And I'm not talking about as you get more advanced. As you get more advanced, your needs in terms of total training volume to keep gaining muscle start to go up. They go up. They go up a lot. In other words, you're not going to be able to obviously run the exact same program with the same volumes and reps and sets that you ran as a novice to make your new gains and keep making gains for the next 5 years doing that. It's not going to work. You might make some gains, but you're not going to maximize your gains. So I'm not saying that you should just do those 5 exercises forever. I obviously even do a lot more than that. But what I am saying is that you can build a hell of a base doing it. And I even did pretty decent before doing Bulgarian training using just those 5 exercises, literally nothing else, for 1 rep. Heavy singles every single day though, and made gains doing it. So it can be done, but it's not necessarily what I would recommend to most people. I don't think it's the best way for you to get as jacked as possible, but you need a base in those. But you're going to need to add other stuff. And I always tell people, the base you're trying to get to, if you want to look like you lift walking down the street, I don't mean compared to some fitness YouTuber who's blasting Tren and Anavar and whatever else. Talk about walking down the street in person to look like you lift in the real world. Right, if you can get to 400 squat, 500 deadlift, 300 bench, 200 press at 100-pound weighted chin up or pull up, you're going to be relatively jacked. But when I say that, people also assume that means I want people to do only those exercises, and that's just not true. That's not true. I think people do need to add other stuff in. The problem we get to is when people just add random stuff in. Right? They add random stuff in. That's my problem with certain things that people try to do. Like people literally think that their bicep is so complicated that there's 4 different exercises that will make your biceps grow differently. Like it's a totally different training stimulus, and that's just not true. Biceps not that complicated. Pectoral's not that complicated. A tricep isn't that complicated. And so what I tell people is that select things carefully. What I would say is that, okay, maybe you do need some extra bicep work because that will get you stronger on your chin-ups. The chin-ups are still giving you most of your size. You need to understand that. So maybe you need some sort of extra bicep work, and maybe you need a bicep exercise that's going to be there to help you get stronger on the chin up. Or you need something that's going to work it differently than the chin up. Maybe you're doing a lot of pronated grip pull-ups, and maybe you do need something with some supination of the wrist, so you do add in a barbell curl or an incline curl, fine. Fine, just don't train it to the point to where your connective tissue can't recover and it interferes with the big lift, because if it interferes with the big lift, you're going to have problems. But I'm not talking about someone in their first 3 or 4 months in the gym. Because people need to remember, the research has generally shown that adding single joint exercises to a moderate volume program full of big multi-joint exercises doesn't cause any extra muscle growth when it's been studied. In other words, adding curls and tricep extensions for a novice in the gym, to my knowledge, no study has successfully shown that it caused more muscle growth. Meaning their triceps grew as much as possible by doing a pretty decent number of total reps and sets with progressive overload on the bench press actually caused the novice lifters maximum tricep growth. They didn't grow any further. In studies that have looked at it, and they compared it to groups who added tricep extensions, they didn't grow more. And that's just reality. However, as you get more advanced, a lot of these areas are going to need extra work. They're going to need extra work capacity, and that's a case where smaller movements can have their place. And what I would say to a lot of people is that if you need to do the smaller movements, pick smaller movements that are going to help make you stronger on the big exercises. People say, well, what do you mean? Well, if your chin-ups really suck and your biceps are a weak link, you might want to do some heavy cheek curls, right? Okay, fine. It'll probably help your biceps grow and help your back grow, because it'll make you stronger on your chin-ups, which are your main training stimulus. Adding a little extra volume, you're going to get a little stronger in your biceps. Biceps will grow a little bit, which in turn will help your back and everything else grow. If they're a limiting factor, by all means, knock yourself out. But don't expect them to work magic. Things like hamstrings. That's a big one. Hamstrings, abs, lower back. I would say to a lot of people, if you really want to get stronger at your big 5, and you know that, say, your hamstrings and posterior chain in general is a limiting factor, you might want to find a gym that has something like a glute ham raise. I would say if you have room in your home and you can afford one, get a glute ham raise to have at home. That's an exercise you can do at home if your gym doesn't have one. Most good gyms have a GHR. All right, get in and do some hamstring work on the GHR. In fact, I feel that is probably, as far as a non-free weight movement, I think the glute ham raise device is one of the actual training tools that I think brings most of the table. I think it's one of the best training tools ever invented, because you can do a lot with it. Because you can also do, besides your GHRs, which are probably the best direct hamstring builder ever, in my opinion, based on my observation and the fact that it works one of the functions of the hamstring that deadlifts, and I mean all deadlifts, can't work. Well, that hamstring development that's going to give you is going to carry over to your deadlifts. It'll carry over to your squats. It'll give you better knee stability. Right? It's going to improve a lot of things. You can also do ab work on the glute ham device. You can do hyperextensions to help work your lower back, your glutes. Well, those areas can be weak links. I always tell guys, if you want to get really strong on the standing press, the squat, and the deadlift, which are all massive size builders, well, making sure your lower back, your abs, your hamstrings are up to speed with a little extra work for them isn't a bad idea, is it? It's going to help you get bigger overall. So that's usually my advice to people. Pick exercises that are going to give you stability on these big lifts. Pick exercises that are going to help you build muscles that might be weak link in these big lifts. Because if you can fix those weak links, if the big lifts keep going up, and I don't mean just your 1 rep max, how about your 5 rep max? How about your 5x5? How about your 3x8? If you can keep getting stronger at all the rep ranges and improve your strength and work capacity in general on those 5 exercises, by adding this other supplemental work, you're going to continue to grow and get bigger. Now, I do some other exercise variations as a more advanced lifter. I do them for a reason, but that's for considerably more advanced people. They have their place when you're trying to maximize training volume. But if you don't have the free time to maximize training volume, it may not be worth your while to go through the trouble to do all the extra box squats and floor presses and all that I do, because I end up doing tons of those. But glute ham raises, absolutely. How about face pulls? I would say face pulls and glute ham raises would be 2 of the first exercises I would add in. If you really want to go beyond the big 5 and you're wanting to add other exercises, my problem is when people pick silly little shit that's going to cause tendon inflammation. They pick some goofy tricep extension that is just going to inflame their tendons And then it makes it harder for them to bench press and overhead press, and then they think the bench is hurting their elbows. All right, that's sort of nonsense. That's what we need to be avoiding. But thoughtful exercises that are actually going to bring up your weak links, or you pick a tricep exercise that is going to make your triceps stronger, that will carry over to the bench and the overhead press, well, that's worthwhile, isn't it? You can find one that doesn't cause connective tissue inflammation because some silly bodybuilder does it. You know, some JM presses are properly done, skull crushers done correctly. All right, by all means, knock yourself out, especially if you've stalled. You've been training hard at least 6 months. You've stalled on your big five. You want to start working other stuff in. That's two of the first things I would pick right up front would be stuff like face pulls, glute ham raises, extra abdominal work. That's going to give you the most bang for your buck, because that's going to be things that carry over to all your big lifts. They're going to improve things like shoulder stability, make your rear delts grow, your hamstrings, your abs. These are oftentimes limiting factors that help create stability that you need also to help reduce injuries. So that's usually the direction I would go if we want to go beyond the big five and start working in other lifts rather than fluffy bodybuilder type stuff. All right, because if you can give yourself exercises that are going to increase your performance on your big lifts and make them safer by putting muscle in the right places, you will continue to gain muscle everywhere, which should be your goal. If you're trying to look big walking down the street, not to go win some physique contest, you're not worried about sculpting everything perfectly. You're worried about putting on size. And the vast majority of people out there who are still trying to gain size still are not as big as they want to be overall. And they really don't need to be worried about refining each little thing at the expense of overall size, because that's usually what it does. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.